Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this latest webinar of Climate Camp, where we're going to talk a bit more about going beyond reporting. But before we dive into the webinar, before I start sharing, could the attendees who are currently here please confirm that you can hear me properly, that you can see me properly, and confirm this in the chat on the right-hand side. Okay, perfect. We are live and ready to go. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about going beyond the reports, how we can turn sustainability into a business catalyst. Now, normally, I'll give these webinars, I'll do a technical topic. We'll dive a bit deeper into certain aspects of sustainability. But today, we're going to look at sustainability a bit more holistically, how the role is changing and what it is changing into. Sustainability for the last decade has been focused on building systems for measurement, for reporting, meeting compliance obligations. Obviously, in larger corporations, sustainability has been a topic for quite some time. But now with changing market realities, with more economic pressure, with geopolitical changes in legislation, the sustainability function has to change. It has to change to serve business outcomes. And therefore, sustainability as a skill, as a profession, needs to change as well. Therefore, today we're going to talk about sustainability not as specific expertise, but what skills does the sustainability professional require today versus in the last couple of years, or maybe in the next years to come. We're also going to talk a little bit more about how the sustainability professional can move towards action without falling short on reporting obligations. Obviously, we still have to comply. Obviously, we still have to deliver certain reports, but we also need to move towards more action. How can we do that? And the two components which are linked to that, which is increasing efficiency within the function, efficiency in tasks, efficiency in processes, but also how we can involve the right expertise and the right capabilities at the right time. Now, I'm not just going to give a monologue on this topic. I invited somebody today who has quite some expertise on the topic, and therefore I invited Gus Bartholomew, who is joining me today. Gus has over a decade of experience in sustainability, boots on the ground. He has worked in India and production sites with certifications, with advancing sustainability on factory level, actually doing the sustainability work, but then also quickly transitioning into sustainability and tech, building software solutions, tech solutions to solve specific sustainability problems. He did that in the fashion industry, but today he is also a co-founder of Leafr. And Leafr is a platform that helps you get the right expertise at the right time, which has an ecosystem of over 1,000 senior sustainability professionals. Gus, welcome to the webinar. Glad you could join us.
Thanks very much for having me. Nice to be here.
All right, let's dive straight in. Now, I'm sharing my screen. As you can see, we have many different tasks and responsibilities. It's a visual I stole from Gus's site, which I think really encapsulates all the different things that sustainability is required or expected to act upon. But before we dive in, so I've already mentioned Gus and his experience. I am Maarten. I am the marketing lead for Climate Camp, and I will be your host throughout the webinar. Now, I'm just going to show slides for the agenda. Then we're going to make this a conversation between Gus and me. I think we see enough slides in our day-to-day lives. So let's maybe focus on the content of the conversation. But today in the webinar, we are going to cover 4 topics. The 4 topics being, first, we're going to look a bit at the history and the current state of sustainability, how we move from operational ESG to actually creating strategic impact. The second topic is how we then align sustainability with business outcomes. So how do we serve sustainability and how does it impact business, or how can we frame it as how it can impact business? Then thirdly, we're going to focus on increasing efficiency, how to free up time while still meeting reporting obligation. Finally, we're also going to talk about involving the right capabilities at the right time. Now, the webinar itself will take about 45 minutes, and at the end, we will have a Q&A section. Any and all questions you have during the webinar, you can post them in the Q&A section. It is on top here in Microsoft Teams somewhere, where you can pose your question, but we will only answer them at the end as to not disrupt the flow of the webinar itself. So I'll stop sharing my screen so we can get into just a conversation. Voila. And then we can get towards the different topics. So Gus, let's first focus on the first topic we're going to talk about today, the move or the transition from operational ESG to strategic impacts. Could you talk me a bit through how has the sustainability profession changed in the last 5 to 10 years and what is driving this shift?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, as you said, I think that today, when we look at sustainability, it's 50 or so different specialisms, and they're so wide-ranging and so deep. Yet we generally still have tiny teams within organizations. The average team size is typically still 1 or 2, even in very large listed businesses, and that really comes through. We do a report every year called the True State of Sustainability, where we look at things like team sizes, structures, reporting lines, and that really kind of comes through. So it's we think of it really as a quite impossible task for a team of that size. But in terms of the shift, I now think what we see within those 50 different specialisms is so many different types of skill sets that are needed. Sustainability spans everything from having to set a strategy to persuading internal teams to actually doing compliance work, to doing transformation work, to doing optimization work. It spans so many different skills. But I think more broadly, in terms of the shift we've seen over the sort of last 10, 15 years, is the function becoming far more operational, and actually needing to do the work. We think about it in terms of previously, it was really like the role of the sustainability lead. It was really the kind of era of persuasion. It was, how do we make sure that we get this on the agenda? How do we get the business to align with this, get signed up to actually concrete commitments? And that's broadly been done and at least kind of achieved through a lot of the things that have happened in the last few years. But now we're at the really difficult stage where there are baselines. We've actually got to take action, and so this is this much more tricky kind of era of execution, an era of reduction, which I think is ultimately a very, very different skill set that is required. So yeah, I think there's been a massive shift in terms of how the sustainability function operates, and that is really starting to come through as well now in terms of the kind of reporting structures. It's one of the areas that I think is most fascinating and that I always look first to really look at, to understand how a company is thinking about sustainability. If you go back sort of 5-10 years, you would see the head of sustainability, if there was one, or let's just say the lead sustainability lead within an organization, reporting into pretty much every single different function. We've kind of seen it all. Could be reporting into marketing, could be reporting into finance, could be reporting into ops, could really be reporting anyway. We've seen it reporting into revenue. We've seen it reporting into sales. Like, it all goes. Whereas now, I think there's been much more of a shift as we look at it being far more operational and far more regulatory led, is into basically to finance or operations or risk, and I think that ultimately is the right area for it. I would also say with a lot of businesses, and I still kind of push businesses to do more on this, is the level at which it's reporting. And you'd often find within even sizable businesses the sustainability lead being 2, 3, 4 rungs down from the executive level. And ultimately, with a lot of the things that are being asked of sustainability teams, especially when it comes to like the big messy work of kind of business transformation, fundamentally that can't happen at 2-3 rungs down. It needs to be an executive level agenda item, and so I think we're starting to see that shift, and even at the top, there's been quite a number of interesting changes within large kind of FMCG businesses and banks, where you've had a much more of a kind of coordination of the roles of kind of sustainability, risk, and operations. I think that sort of signals a fair amount in terms of the maturity and how a lot of businesses are starting to think about how this era of execution really needs to be driven.
Okay. Do you then feel, because Leafr deals a lot with briefs and filling specific roles or niches that are lacking, do you feel that this shift in skills is required across the board, small companies, large companies, across geographies? It's a universal trend that sustainability needs to go higher up in the rungs and the hierarchy to actually affect these reduction or these other ESG metrics?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think you've got to look at each company on an individual basis in terms of, what is the core thing that's driving them to do this work. And I think that for the larger businesses, this is ultimately, it is now being driven by regulation, right? Whereas for smaller businesses, it is ultimately still generally something that is optional. They're doing it because they want to. Now, I think, but it comes down to the ambition of each of those businesses. If you want to make business transformation, that is ultimately the role of the executive, right? It can't be done by someone who is in sort of further down the org. I don't think. So I do think you need to have that executive level sponsor or direct line to really help make these big challenges. One of the things that I often think about here is that if you take something like businesses that are committed to net zero, there's an amount you can do. The kind of what I'd call like the easy yards. If you've got a reduction target, maybe you can reduce your emissions by 20-30% by just doing a number of things which are the kind of easy wins. But when you get to that middle chunk and the last chunk of really difficult challenges, that is the stuff which is not just kind of working on the edge. You've got to change the kind of core of the business, and I think at that level you've got to have some level of serious executive sponsorship.
Okay, so then if you look at the sustainability professional today, you employ a bunch of, Leafr has a bunch of senior sustainability professionals. Which are the skills that are in demand right now? Which are the skills, the profiles that companies are looking towards in the market right now?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a big mix, and again, it kind of depends on company size. I think that the big shifts that we're starting to see, and you obviously hear a huge amount of this the whole time within sustainability, in terms of you need to be looking at sustainability with a business value lens. It's got to be business value first, and I think that in the current climate, we see even more of this in terms of like the language of the roles and the projects that need to be done. So I think that's been a massive shift. So we're now seeing a lot more demand for less in the kind of strategy pieces and more in the actual operational pieces. So there's still a huge amount of work and demand for what I'd say are the kind of core sustainability skills, carbon accounting, reporting, LCAs, product carbon footprints, that kind of thing. But more and more so, we're also seeing businesses put money behind their climate transition plans, adaptation and resilience plans, that sort of thing.
Okay, I know you have a pretty strong opinion on the certain competencies that are required of a sustainability professional, and I mean the competencies that are not domain specific. So I'm not talking product footprinting, LCAs, different types of different aspects, but more a set of skills that a sustainability professional needs to affect these changes, to turn reporting into action. Could you tell me a bit more about what you think a sustainability professional, is it executive or manager level, actually needs to affect change?
Yeah. So I mean, this comes back to there's one of the kind of core arguments that I think happens within the sustainability sphere. And we had a conference on Friday, and someone once said this line, and it kind of it gets me a bit heated up when people say, "Oh, the job of a sustainability lead is actually, they should make themselves redundant because it should be so ingrained within the business that it's no longer a function." I completely disagree with that. I think that there's so much breadth and depth to sustainability. It doesn't, but I think the core message that they're really getting at with that is that you need to be able to get all other departments on board with your agenda. And I think that one of the things that we really push for is how do you basically take whatever your initiative is within sustainability and translate it into a way that another function can really care about it and get behind it. And it's actually it's incredibly powerful way of translating your message. And I think the most effective sustainability leaders we see use this a lot to really drive their agenda. So a sustainability person might be saying, hey, look, we really need to reduce our emissions because we've signed up to SBTI and it's really important. But actually, for someone who's working in operations or finance, well, why is that important to me? But if you could frame it, say, for a CFO, let's just give like a high level example where you can say, well, actually, look, if we switch energy suppliers, or actually if we start generating energy on site, this is like a massive win in terms of resilience. It means that we're not dependent on where you're working, but like this is a great example from my kind of time on the ground in India. The main reason that we saw factories adopt renewable power was nothing to do with it being green. It was the fact that the grid would often completely shut down and you'd be out of power for 4 hours. So actually, by having solar panels on your roof and wind turbines in your field, you had energy security. So actually, if you're a sustainability lead and you're really pushing for green energy, renewable energy, actually frame it in a way that someone in operations or finance is going to really care about. Actually, look, the payback here is really clear. It makes sense for us to do this. In terms of operations, this means we're far more resilient. We're not going to have downtime. So you're achieving exactly the same outcome that you want, but you've translated it into something that is really tangible and very attractive to another department. And I think that we often forget to do that within sustainability.
Okay, I want to pick in on that with an example a little bit later, but let's first segue into actually the second topic, because you're already talking about it, how to communicate sustainability initiatives and relay them to business outcomes, be it on a supply chain side, be it on a financial side, be it on different aspects of the business. So the second topic, which I wanted to dive into a little bit more, clarify a bit more, is, okay, we need to move from compliance to action. But to get action done, you need investments, not only financial investment, you need time investment from different elements of the organization who need to spend their time on requesting certain data, following up with suppliers or following up with customers. So sustainability is a sort of conductor. They need different elements from different people, and then they also need these people to do certain things to advance sustainability, not only on a climate aspect. You need HR to improve social aspects. Governance is managed by many different people within the organizations. So sustainability needs to be able to translate the effects, the moral effects of sustainability, less climate impact, better social systems, to other business outcomes. You mentioned it, increasing resilience, cutting costs, opening up new market segments, and then just get other stakeholders involved with what they care about. Procurement cares about what procurement cares about. C-level cares about what they care about. So understanding what they want to achieve and how sustainability can help them achieve it. So how does a sustainability professional go about making that change happen? How do you go about translating, reducing our emissions by 10% will lead to these consequences or other ESG improvements?
Yeah. So ultimately, it comes down to how do you translate and communicate it to another department to get them to care and to get them to take on that, part of your agenda. Because as you outlined there, right, there's so many different areas that you're going to have to focus. And as a team of 1 or 2 people, like, it's impossible for you to do that unless you bring other people on board. So, and this kind of comes back to one of the first points that I was making. I think that what you often see in businesses and where we often fall down is that you've got a individual small sustainability team trying to persuade other departments why they should care, why they should make this part of their day job. And that is ultimately a very difficult role because, frankly, everyone is very, very busy, right? They've got a job description, they've got their KPIs, that's what they're going to focus on every single day. And that's why I think it's so important to have that executive level buy-in, because you need to really provide incentives for each department to want to do each of these things. So actually, within operations, making one of their KPIs, we need to improve efficiency by X amount, and looking at these key areas. As soon as something becomes part of someone's job description, part of one of the KPIs that they need to actually hit to be successful at their role, it becomes far easier, rather than just having a separate department which is really trying to push and get people to act for the good of it on top of their job. That's what makes it so difficult. And we see this even a lot with decent sized businesses, where the whole sustainability function is essentially just an add-on to someone else's job, right? It's not its own function. It's kind of what we call like a two-hatter. They are the head of compliance, or they're the head of operations and the head of sustainability. And inevitably what you see there is that it just ultimately is the first thing to fall off the agenda. So I think that's where we think about how do you embed it into other teams. It's not necessarily about having an individual within that team that's doing that work. I think it's going right at the top and saying, how do we drive the outcomes of this department in a way that is actually going to help that overall agenda.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to maybe add something on top of that. Recently, I've had a lot of discussions with sustainability professionals, but also, for example, in F&B. And when talks circle around procurement, for example, it's also, I feel, a lot about understanding the realities of a certain person's job or a certain person's, not even in your own company, but outside your own company, within your value chain, for example. I'll give the example. It's like you have livestock farmers. I talked to a major meat processor recently. And there, the discussion around cost savings and time savings for using methane inhibitors is much more about farmers, livestock farmers. They don't have a lot of time. They work from sun up till sundown. They have audit days. They're overbooked. They might even have a second job because livestock farming is not that profitable. So for them to be able to save weeks on, for example, manure distribution or have higher manure content is more about you can save a couple of weeks. And I understand that using these methane inhibitors will create that extra time, which is much more valuable to them than maybe the 1% yield they lose by using these methane inhibitors. So this person I talked to really said, like, you need to understand the reality of a farmer, the reality of a livestock farmer, what they deal with. And it's not always about that 1% margin they lose, but it's oftentimes about 3 or 4 weeks time, which they do not have. And I think this is really important outside of your value chain, but also within your company, the procurement person, the CFO, different departmental heads, just have different things they need to deal with. Another example is I talked to a lingerie brand recently, and she's like, okay, we need to convince people in other departments to focus on sustainability because their top priority is even getting the goods in today with the tariffs, with market disruptions, etc. It's already a hassle to get certain goods in on time and make sure that availability is met. Sustainability is then a very last in line thing to be able to act upon. So motivating people to embed that in their function is also a big, I think, sustainability responsibility. Do you agree with that?
No, I do agree with that. I mean, yeah, ultimately, I think it comes to how do you embed your initiatives in their problems and not your problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where perhaps people don't spend enough time thinking, right, how does this actually relate to this other function, and how do I translate what I need in a way that makes it really, really align and work for them. And I do think those opportunities exist far more than we make out, but because we've been tasked with, look, this is what we need to deliver, let's go on and kind of push our agenda. But if you can find ways to align and it become critical to the procurement team, then the whole thing becomes far easier and less of an uphill battle, and just sort of put to the back of the line.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have any examples? Because yeah, you have an ecosystem of over 1,000 sustainability professionals. You have been in the scene for quite some while. Have you seen an example of a company that was just sustainability is filling out the reports and nothing else towards actually the strategic function?
So what's some good examples? I mean, I think like in financial services, quite a kind of clean case study for this, because that's shifted massively from talking about just like ESG for reporting to transition finance, climate risk, this sort of thing, and it means that it's just completely transitioned how people are looking at it. So yeah, I think it become like it's just making it far less about this add-on thing that we need to it being a core part of the business. And we are seeing that also more in general, especially with like supply chains, food and beverage, where we now talk about it in terms of resilience. Like, how are we building resilience into our supply chains? How are we actually looking at this from like responsible sourcing perspective? What's the nature impact? How can we do stuff there? Because what is now like far better understood is just how much protecting that and doing things well there has a massive knock-on impact on every other part of the supply chain and the operation for that business.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you then feel that, for example, for a sustainability professional, it's also very important to embed themselves within the industry, but also within maybe sustainability professionals who deal with the same challenges to build these business cases, to make the case for, okay, let's put a number to resilience, let's put a number to what happens if supply chains get disrupted, or we can't source from this country because of bad weather conditions. Do you feel like the sustainability professional needs to unite a bit within its industry to better
Yeah,
build these ROIs?
fundamentally, that's one of the key insights for Leafr and why we've built the business in the way that we have. We really believe that you should have a small core team within a business that is ultimately responsible for setting strategy, aligning stakeholders within the business, and then you are bringing in specific experts that have deep sectoral expertise with an individual thing, because things are moving so quickly at the moment that you actually have these massively outsized gains by bringing in a professional who, there's plenty of examples of this, but I'll just give like I guess a relevant one, which is, CSRD is obviously coming for a large number of businesses. Someone who has already done a first report for at CSRD 3 times over for a business in manufacturing, let's say, is not just like a little bit more qualified than someone who's a very well-trained professional who's tackling it for the first time. They're miles ahead, and so it's so much more effective for businesses to bring in specialists who have really focused their efforts on doing one thing for a particular industry incredibly well. And so I think being able to just grab them as and when you need really helps you to get away from get better outcomes, because that person has seen this problem 3, 4, 5 times over and is experienced within the industry. So it's why consultancies more broadly have that advantage, and why you go to them, right? Because they should have seen this problem multiple times before. They know exactly how you should be thinking about the implementation of it within your business. So that's what I think is more and more critical.
Okay, I'll circle back to this when we're talking about involving the right expertise and right capabilities, because I do want to dive a bit more into this. But we've been talking for the last 10, 15 minutes. Okay, sustainability, it's shifting from reporting to action to maybe effectuating a lot more on an operational level, on in relationship with the value chain, in relationship with the board, for example. But there is only so much time in a day. There's only so much time in a week. Sustainability budgets are under pressure. We are expected, or sustainability professionals are expected to do more with less, or at the very least the same, be it resources as in financial resources, but also time. So it also becomes a question of increasing efficiency, because I showed you the image in the beginning, which I stole from your website. You have a lot of different responsibilities as sustainability professional. So you need to increase your efficiency. You need to increase the way you handle certain tasks and processes. Now, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. Gus has a lot of experience in sustainability and tech. I have been for the last 10, 12 years at the crossroads of tech and functions, business functions and SMEs. And actually what happens now in sustainability is the same thing that has been happening for the last 10, 15 years, where you have these business functions, sales and marketing, finance, HR, which have a bunch of admin, which is relevant. Is it tracking sales meetings? Is it logging accounts? Is it tracking expenses? Is it managing absences? There's a bunch of admin involved, and okay, we see admin as this tedious process, reporting, data collection, but it does serve its purpose, be it making smarter decisions based on the data, or on the other hand, sustainability leaders, it doesn't affect as much, but really the laggards that don't really invest that much in sustainability, or making sure that certain systems, checks and balances are in place to prevent things going wrong. So it does serve a function, but it is a very tedious process. It takes a lot of time. It's very manual often, because you need to go back and forth, mail, check data. So it's not always the most inspiring work. And also every minute you spend on reporting on the current state is a minute you cannot spend on affecting the outcome ultimately. So admin, it's often a burdensome, but it has quite some value. I think nobody wishes a farmer another audit day just as much as we don't wish a sustainability manager another Excel. But then we need to think a bit more proactively about how can sustainability increase its efficiency. So after my short tangent, maybe Gus, I want to take it back to you. You have also a lot of experience with tech and sustainability. If you look at the sustainability professional today, what are the aspects that they should digitize, automate, that they could increase their efficiency through technology?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the number one complaint that we hear from sustainability managers and sustainability leaders, right? Which is that they still spend the vast majority of their time trying to gather data, measure, analyze, and report it. And by the time they've kind of done that, the whole cycle is gone once, and it's time to kind of start again for the next annual report. So it's a massive issue where you've got constrained teams that are stuck in what is, as you say, important, like fundamental base work, but that doesn't give them any time, leave any time left for them to actually do the more difficult and much more human side of actually affecting change within the business. So when it comes to that level of kind of automation and systemizing, I think there's we can't touch on this topic without obviously mentioning the big revolution that's happening at the moment in terms of AI and how it can help here. But I think like there's a really useful framework that MIT have released in terms of how to think about what to use AI for, but I actually think it's also very related in terms of just how you should think about what you can automate, and that's the drag framework. So D for drafting, R for reporting, A for analysis, and G, which I think is the biggest time sink actually here, which is grunt work. And there's so many opportunities to actually automate or hand off a lot of that work to AI now, and I think that does hopefully open up a lot more space in the coming years for sustainability leaders to focus on doing the work that ultimately only a human and only them with their knowledge of the business and their relationships within the department can do. So I am very, very hopeful that we are going to start to shift away slowly from so much time being sucked up by ultimately data collection, analysis, and reporting, because a lot of that really should be automated in the next few years.
Mm-hmm. And then maybe let me pick in on the question from another aspect. AI automation can achieve a lot: the grunt work, the manual tedious processes which suck up a lot of time in communication, in information gathering back and forth. Where does the human in the loop then stay? Where do we not automate? Where do we look towards here? Decision making or understanding of context is still really important within sustainability.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the thing to say with every single one of those is that the output is only ever as good as the input, right? So the human input into how you're actually orchestrating, building those systems and building those automations or leveraging AI is still absolutely critical to get the output. So it's not like it's just some magic box that is going to kind of take care of everything for you. Like there's still of course work there, but I think you're looking at potentially 60-70% of it that is able to efficiency gains. So that's kind of how I think about it. It means that you're freed up to spend time actually sitting with your suppliers, working out, right, this is the thing that we think we need to do. How can we actually think about doing this? The actual strategy and plan for implementing these things. Like that's where time should be spent, rather than spending all your time on reporting. Right, this is the analysis. These are our 3 recommendations of what we need to do. Oh, we really need to rationalize our supply base. Okay, well, that's a very easy thing to say. It's an incredibly hard thing to actually do and think about how that impacts the whole system and it impacts the whole company. So freeing up the sustainability leaders' time to go and be able to speak to finance and say, well, and speak to risk and speak to ops. What are the risks of us actually rationalizing our supply chain? What happens if we start to only be reliant on these people? Well, how's it impacting your business? So all of those interdependencies, I think you're going to be able to spend more time discussing and getting into the nitty gritty of that, so you can actually make the change. Whereas right now, it just feels like the outcomes and the wishes is basically wishful thinking. It's so hard to actually carve out enough time to spend working on that. At least that's what we see with so many businesses. And I think there's probably quite an element of truth there, right? If you look at just how many businesses on something like say net zero commitments, how many businesses are really actually meeting their interim targets or staying committed to that to their eventual goals. So I think that we already see a lot of this creaking. And to me, it signals, right, well, we're kind of misallocating the time that we've got here. Let's work out how we can actually spend it on the things that we really need to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe then I'll ask a question which I didn't prepare yourself for, but I think you might be able to answer it anyhow. Leafr mentioned you work with 1,000 senior sustainability professionals. I think And I'm going to frame this question a little bit first before I ask it. I think one of the challenges with, let's say, for example, AI and automation, I'll use development as an example. You need to do sometimes grunt work to get the context, to start understanding the context. For development, it's like you need to do certain coding, then run into certain problems to understand how to solve certain problems, for example. So a senior coder, because of the grunt work they did, because of the context they have went through, are able to look at auto-generated code and immediately identify it will block here, it will struggle here, etc., etc. How does this junior sustainability professional go about increasing its skills? Does it start in a smaller organization? How can the junior actually become really senior within sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, Taylor, I think that is a pretty large problem at the moment that is not unique to sustainability at all, right? Like junior level roles really understanding the nuts and bolts. Because I do fully agree with you. How can you tell if a carbon footprint calculation is actually worth its salt, it's correct and accurate if you don't know the methodology behind it? So I think you still need that kind of academic and practical grounding in a particular topic to be able to go and do it far quicker. In the same way that I think that's what a senior professional is able to do, right? They just instinctively can see and know whether something has been done right, and that's experience, that's years of practice, years of service. So in terms to try and answer your question, like how does a junior actually go about doing that? I think like the same principles still apply. It's about learning from seniors and understanding the methodologies, but behind the work that they're doing, so you do understand the output that's being generated. I don't think that there's an easy fix. In fact, I think it's one of the biggest concerns that I have about how people are implementing and using AI at the moment is that it all works on ultimately generalities, right? The most likely scenario, and so everyone tends towards a singularity. You'll get reporting and calculations that all look broadly the same because we average out emission factors, and so you're actually getting much less accurate accurate reports. I think there's a lot of concerns there in terms of again to the point of like what's the input. You need to really make sure that you're prompting and asking the right questions of anything that you're using to automate or analyze and report, so that you get a decently accurate outcome.
Okay, well, that's good insight to have, both learning from seniors as maybe working in a smaller field, smaller company, to entrench yourself a little bit more with the different topics. Now, I want to move on to the final topic. I'm going to take a little bit more time for the webinar itself because I didn't see any questions raised yet. So I'm going to reiterate, do you have any questions for Gus or myself? Please do ask them. You can do it in the chat or you can do it in the Q&A. But I want to bring it to the final topic, which is involving the right capabilities at the right time. Teams need to be agile. Teams need to be able to go where the need of the business requires them to. Alignment with what the business is trying to achieve. Is it product innovation? Is it business development? Is it differentiation versus competitors? Which means small core generalistic team and then specializations or specialists connected to the main units, because there's also an element of seasonality within sustainability, the Q1 reporting and data collection season where everybody's rushing to get everything out by March and April. Could you tell me a bit more about what's typically the first thing sustainability teams should outsource or would outsource, and how does your experience in Leafr reflect that?
Yeah, so I mean, to come back to kind of what we were saying at the start, is that sustainability teams have generally been built with, let's bring in one generalist who can kind of take care of everything, but that's probably skewed towards a fair amount of kind of data collection reporting. But as the discipline has become far more sophisticated, far broader, and even far deeper in each of those specialisms, asking a generalist to try and do all of those is very much an impossible task. So and often maybe that person isn't so generous. They're much more of a reporting specialist that's then asked to cover these things. So I think that the role of the internal person needs to be the orchestrator, and then be able to bring in specific specialisms for, say, carbon accounting, LCA, transition planning, CSRD, packaging audits, circular economy business models, that kind of thing. They're such different disciplines, right? So I think you need to look at your internal team and say, right, what are the strengths that we have here? What are they able to orchestrate? And then bring in people as and when you need a specific discipline. I think it's one of probably the most underreported risks within businesses at the moment, which is that businesses are often asking generalists to do highly technical work that actually is not just a sustainability risk, it's an incredible business risk in terms of regulatory exposure or investor exposure. Getting something like a transition plan wrong is a board credibility problem. Yet we might just be asking one individual to do this. And so I think that's where I kind of really push businesses to think, like, what is the way that you're doing this really a credible way right now and defensible, because getting this wrong can be very material.
Okay, so you're talking a bit like the reporting aspect, the board credibility when these aspects are not done properly. Are there other examples of expertise that often are outsourced or maybe then rather insourced that doesn't have to do with reporting capabilities?
So I think it's reporting, it's strategy, there's the compliance piece, there's certifications. I think there's very few elements within sustainability where I think the expertise of a specialist isn't going to be better suited than a generalist trying to turn their hand to it. Just to give you an example, right, of an adjacent industry. I think what we see in sustainability at the moment is the equivalent of asking an in-house lawyer, a general counsel, to lead on the IPO of a business. Like, you would never do that, right? It would be absolutely insane risk, and we all appreciate that a general counsel doesn't have those skill sets. Yet so many sustainability leads are asked to do an equivalent type of thing. Get the business CSRD ready. Start reporting on this. We've had this reported by a number of CSOs, which they say actually the biggest risk within our business is that my work is not checked. No one is checking that the work that I'm doing, which is actually critical to the business and has material risk, is sense checked to make sure it's right. And I think that's where it's really difficult, is that sustainability, and I think legal is a good analogy here, because it's poorly understood by the rest of the business often, and so you're not even aware of the risk that sits there, because the general knowledge about that topic is so low. So I think that's something that businesses should be far more aware of.
Okay. Well, it's good to know that what expertise that you can, especially the risk aspect. We talked a lot about the risk for the organization when it comes to operational risk, supply chain risk, the risk of lack of resilience, risk of exposure in other aspects of the business when not acting on sustainability. But we never talked about the risk of not having the right expertise for compliance reasons or for establishing inventories, transition plans, etc., and the risk that poses towards the credibility of the business, the auditability of the inventory, or the compliance work that has been done. All right, Gus, I want to thank you already for a very insightful discussion. I'm going to quickly round out because I don't see there are any questions. So I'm going to give 1 more minute if somebody would have a question to ask them. And then I'm also going to quickly really mention our upcoming webinar as well, as seeing as we have the last 10 minutes before noon. So we're going to talk about the CO2 performance ladder within a month. I'm inviting sustainability manager of Cordeel Group, which is one of the larger construction companies within Belgium, to talk about what it takes to decarbonize as a construction company. Gus, you and I, we had a very high-level talk about the sustainability function. Well, in a month, we're diving deeper into what the challenge is in construction. There are different regulations which are forcing construction to act quicker on embodied carbon on different aspects of decarbonization. So we're diving a little bit more into that within a month. So everybody who would like to join, I will send it in the follow-up afterwards. Thank you, Kate, for the nice remarks with regards to Gus's inputs. Gus, I want to thank you one final time before I end the webinar for your insights. And for everybody who was leaving earlier or who could not make it, I will send the recording afterwards via mail. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Thanks very much.